Hey guys, I think I'm live. I know it always takes a minute. Go ahead and let me know in the chat if you can hear me. I do have it pulled up here on my phone. Oops. Happy May. This month is, wow. There's a lot happening. There is a lot happening. A lot of the more galactic and like asteroids and fixed star. When you look at those, the regular transits that are happening this month are like mind blowing. It's super exciting. Okay, cool. Sound is good. All right, those of you over on Patreon, you have access to the calendar. You can go ahead and print that out. It's linked to the post. Be really great if you had your natal chart with you too. So as I am going through the chart, you guys can reference your chart and look to see what houses all of these things are happening in, because that's how you are going to be experiencing the energy that I talk about. If you're a Patreon member, you also have access to the Apprentice cheat sheet, which you guys know I love. That's really great to have next to you as well, because when you look at your chart and you're like, oh, okay, Mercury is going retrograde in my 8th house, you can look and see what the 8th house means, and you can look to understand how you might be experiencing this type of energy. And it does a really great job of giving a short little synopsis of the signs, the houses, the planets, the aspects, and pretty much the base language of astrology. All right. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and just get started. I have a bunch of stuff I want to go over, and we'll go there. I pulled some cards for the end, and yeah, I like the cards. All right, you guys, I actually remembered to format this so that you could see the whole thumbnail without my face cutting off for like the first time in like almost 2 years. I finally remembered. All right, so this is our thumbnail. I always like to try to encode as much in there as I can. This is kind of where we're going to be going tonight. The big highlight of the month is, there's several, like several. But the main one that you'll probably be hearing the most about is the Scorpio blood moon. So that is the image we have depicted here, is a blood moon. It's actually from a Magic the Gathering card. So the blood moon is going to be the main energy of this month. We will be diving into that heavily over on Patreon later this month, actually on the 13th. As well as the esoteric symbolism around serpents in particular. And as we go through here, you'll kind of see why. Atlantis, black holes, and the mysteries which Scorpio governs. I'm just going to go ahead and read this really quick. Like I said, this is all the stuff we're going to talk about, and then we'll move on. To kind of sum the month of May up, this is a month of intense transformational integration and transmutation, and looking to see where Scorpio in particular falls in your chart, but several other places as well. But Scorpio is where we're going to be having a lot of this illumination, like deep illumination of what was hidden in the shadows, and a period of like accelerated transmutation and rebirth, because of this blood moon, which we'll dive into. But looking to see what house, that'll really help you to see where you can really transform the most this month. Oh my God, Kimberly's here. Oh my gosh, it's past your bedtime. It is a work night, Kimberly. Oh my gosh, you rebel. I cannot believe you are awake. Hi, Stephanie. Oh, Samara. Hi. Oh, yeah, that Stephanie threw me for a loop there. Thank you for that slash. I appreciate it. um, okay, so a month of intense transformational integration and transmutation. I'm trying to put this where it looks like I'm not like constantly looking this direction to look at the chat, but nothing works, so I don't really know what to do. Maybe like that. Maybe that's better. Okay. Okay, rebirth of the soul. Not only because of the scorpionic blood moon, but also because of the planets shifting into Aries this month. Really having this rebirth, this phoenix moment within the self, within our soul. Celestial waters, the seen and the unseen. Electric insights, particularly tomorrow. We'll get into that in a second. Unexpected changes, faded new directions that, we couldn't even fathom for ourselves. Like really big karmic faded changes are transpiring. And like I had said for last month and for our previous eclipse, that eclipse was intense too, and unexpected and transformative and all these things, but it was a new moon, so it was seeding a new story. So all of those things we're not really gonna grasp for 6 months as that story is seeded and culminates 6 months later. It started a new chapter. The area of our life ruled by Scorpio this month, where we're having this blood moon, that's a full moon, that's a culmination, that's where we're really feeling it. This is going to illuminate the shadows, like I had said, both the mysteries that reside within them, and, the things that we need to work through. Hi, Sean. Unexpected changes, faded new directions, illuminating the shadows and the mysteries of the underworld, illusions and mystic truths. We're in this kind of, like, for lack of a better term, portal between one reality and another. We're sitting in between eclipses, and we're in this weird sort of limbo realm where we are like between two worlds and outside of both time and space. This is where I live because that's where I was born. I was born in between the two eclipses. So that's what my life is always like constant changes, constant transformations, constantly feeling like you're outside of time and space. And that's kind of how this month is going to feel. It's going to feel very strange and otherworldly and interdimensional. Revisiting the message and restructuring our foundations. That's like the key energy of the Mercury retrograde that starts this month. We have Atlantis retrograde. We're going to be talking a lot about the center of our galaxy. We have some exciting announcements hopefully happening later this month, so we'll talk about that. Major supergalactic center alignments. Tons of planets will be aligning with the supergalactic center as well as the Andromeda galaxy. We actually have planets aligning with all three of our black holes, the galactic center, the supergalactic center, and the Andromeda galactic center, as well as key, I guess it's not an aspect, but what's being shown in our sky the highest during the night sky throughout this month is what's known as the realm of galaxies and the polar axis of our entire galaxy. So like the North Pole of the Milky Way galaxy, like where its equator would be and where its pole would be, is what is the highest point in our night sky. You can't see it, or this like realm of galaxies, without a microscope, but it's there. And so this focus this month, the same month that they're going to be divulging some new discoveries, is really around the more galactic aspects of our solar system, and they're all showing up. One of the placements aligning with the Andromeda Galaxy is Venus. And so we are going to be experiencing this huge galactic heart expansion in the process of all this transformation. Mercury retrograde, which is actually conjunct both the Pleiades and Hecate, and this concept of the importance of polarity, which is something we're going to dive into here in a couple of slides. I'm going to check in with the chat really quick. I see you guys all in here. I'm so glad you're here, Samara. Kimberly's laughing. Scorpio rising. Does that mean that it's my first house? It does mean that it's your first house. It might be your 12th, or yeah, it might be your. It's your first house if you use whole sign house calculation, which I normally do. But if you use Placidus, depending on what degree, it might be falling in your 12th house, but yes, it rules your first house. Everybody's saying hi. Huge fated changes already for Samara. Total shift from where I thought I was going. Oh yeah, you were supposed to touch base with me after that session and fill me in on all the big things that I felt were right around the corner for you. Hi, Janelle. Carolyn says that Scorpio is her 4th house at 20 degrees with Uranus at 23. So you're having your Uranus opposition. Progressed moon is in Scorpio at 20 degrees, and her birthday is on May 13th. Oh, how exciting. The sun conjuncts the North Node on that day. She also has her sun at 23 degrees of Taurus, conjunct Mercury, and the moon at 13 degrees of Taurus. Oh my gosh, Carolyn, that's a lot. Fun. Okay, let's dive in. Okay, so those of you on Patreon, you have access to the PDF, which is going to be a lot easier to read than this. This is super blurry. I can't get these PDFs to save as a JPEG, so I can put it on a slide and have it not be blurry. I've tried, but we're just going to roll with it. Those of you on Patreon, on YouTube, you can go ahead and take a screenshot of this if you would like to. This is when I remind you guys to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, to leave a comment and all of that for the algorithm to make it happy. Thank you. Also, if you are interested in joining my Patreon, that is also linked below. All the Patreon videos are now unlocked for all the tiers. So it's kind of like a sliding scale. You can pretty much pay whatever you want and have access to all the video content. And then there's different tiers. There are more expensive tiers where like we meet one-on-one and do sessions, or I mail stuff to you every month. But for all the video content, you can pretty much pay whatever you want, like as low as $3. Yeah, I'm not really going to cover too much of this other than to point out here down at the bottom. If anybody knows how to do this on Canva without this stupid line at the bottom, like please let me know because I have no idea. Down at the bottom we have our color key so that you understand what all of the colors mean. I also want to point out the fact that there are 2 different, like, I guess, zodiacal systems. I don't know if that's the right term, but there's two different zodiacal systems being used. There's the traditional Western tropical astrology, which is all of the colors here except for the blue and white one, where we're looking at the traditional zodiac and the planets and the asteroids transit through there. And then we have the moon's transit through the month. So that is the sun's transit through a tropical year. And I've been pairing that with the moon's transit through a zodiacal month to try and work with everything. Because I am a firm believer that the characteristics of the signs of the zodiac are strongly correlated to the seasons, and that unfortunately when we have the stars shift, the stars move out of alignment with the seasons. And I do believe that aligning yourself with the flow of the seasons is a pivotal part of finding like equilibrium. And tracking following along with tropical astrology helps you to do that. It really helps you to get in alignment with the seasons. But that is not where our stars are now. They have shifted. And so the blue little words down at the bottom of all the little boxes, that's the moon's transit through the month as it makes alignments with significant fixed stars, the fixed stars that we've been using lately. And I feel doing all of this together kind of helps to work with all of it. And so this is the kind of system that I've been doing lately. And so that's what's going on here. If you've watched my videos, you kind of already know this. I'm not going to dive too deep into it now. I kind of did more than I already wanted to. Okay. Down at the bottom, we also have what we're going to talk about here in the next two slides, which is something I've been doing in the latest videos ever since I found this book that helps me to do it. North Star to the Southern Cross, I've talked about in the last couple of videos. So this concept of the night sky, right? So I was talking earlier about how the realm of galaxies will be seen in our night sky. And this concept of, how astrology really is in the past for the ancients was more kind of reserved for the elite priestly class of certain civilizations, right? But these stories, these mythologies were told by everyone, from peasants to royalty. And the stories they normally told were of the stars that we could see, of the night sky, which are actually the opposite stars to the ones that we're in the season of. So in Taurus season, our sun is in Taurus, but our night sky, what we're seeing is Scorpio. And so I've been starting to kind of include the wider picture, since I think that's kind of my jam, is combining things together and then expanding it outward as far as it can possibly go while going in deep, deep, deep into certain areas of it. I don't know. This is just how I roll. And so what we have down at the bottom is what we can see in our night sky, which is what the next couple of slides are going to dive into. As well as where the Earth is. Okay, so this is something you guys might not know. You can actually put the Earth into your astrology program and you can use it. And some people do. And in the past, they did much more so. I actually have this book here. This book is from 1900. It was actually gifted to me from Jamie. I don't know if you're here, Jamie, but thank you for this book. And it's called Earthology, and it's written by an occultist in the year 1900. And the whole premise of this is actually a quote from this book down here at the bottom, Polarity is True Harmony. The whole premise of this book, while it is extremely dated in its interpretations, the premise behind it is that we don't just have a sun sign. We have a sun sign and we have an earth sign. So it's easy to know where your earth placement is because it's exactly opposite your sun. So for example, my sun falls at 5 degrees of Libra, and so my earth placement is 5 degrees of Aries, exactly opposite that. That's your earth sign. And the concept of this book is that you have this sort of polarity within you, and that opposing force is how you are meant to ground your consciousness into reality. It's how you can balance your egoic light. It's how you can ground it into physicality. It represents the earth. And it's interesting because my Earth sign falls in Aries. It actually is conjunct my North Node. And it falls in the 8th house of the occult, of astrology, and it's in Aries, the pioneer. And so for me to ground my consciousness into physicality, what helps give me that foundation, that rooting, is this realm of the mysteries of the occult, of astrology. And so looking to see the sign, the house placement, and any sort of planets that might be conjunct that point that sits exactly opposite your sun will give you insight into your Earth sign. And I think it's really cool that we're talking about this during Taurus season, which is the first Earth sign, Earth element sign of astrology. And so during the month of May, our sun will be in the signs of Taurus and Gemini. And so therefore the Earth will be in the signs of Scorpio and Sagittarius. This is also the signs where we'll be experiencing our next 2 full moons. That's how it works. The opposite sign of the sun is where we experience our full moons. And so that's where we will be having illuminations, culminations, harvests, and this period of release then after. So if you guys know where your Earth sign is, you can go ahead and write in the chat. You can also, there's not many blogs on this, but there are some, and you can Google what that means, like Earth sign and astrology in this house or whatever, and you can read some blogs up on that. Or you can buy this book from the 1900s, but it's so dated, it's like not the best interpretations. But there's really great diagrams in there, and this is something that I'm going to be diving more deeply into, is this concept of this polarity that helps bring true harmony between the Earth sign and the Sun sign. And I find it interesting that the Earth sign always correlates to where the full moons are that month, that sit opposite where the sun is. And so it really speaks to the feminine polarity being both. And if we use this, it brings that feminine polarity into the entire zodiac, because we're never just looking at where the sun is the whole time. We understand that that is a polarity and the Earth is there too. So as you can see here in this diagram, this is the month of May. The sun will be in the constellation of Taurus, moving into the constellation of Gemini. And these are the constellations that are in our night sky, with the Earth falling in the constellation of Scorpio and moving into the constellation of Sagittarius. These are all of the things that are extremely visible in the night sky throughout the month, including, like I said, at the bottom, you can see the realm of galaxies, which actually falls inside a very interesting constellation that we dove into recently over on Patreon. Here you see it referred to as Berenice's Hair, which is the wife of an Alexandrian scribe, or maybe he was an astronomer. I can't remember what he was, but he named this constellation after his wife. And before that, it was actually referred to as Coma. And what was depicted was not the wig of his wife. It was a divine mother holding a little divine child. And it was really this divine mother, divine child constellation that aligns perfectly with the realm of galaxies and the North Celestial Pole. So I'm not going to read this over here, but it just shows you the constellations that are extremely visible in the night sky, including the Southern Cross, which is the constellation that sits opposite Polaris, opposite the North Pole star. We don't have a South Pole star, but the constellation that's closest to the South Pole is the Southern Cross. And you can actually see it in much of the Northern Hemisphere throughout the month of May. From, let's see, it says Florida, southern parts of Florida, Texas, and any of the islands of Hawaii. So if you're in those places, you can see the Southern Cross. The Centaur constellation, not Sagittarius, but Centaurus, is visible throughout the month, including Alpha Centauri, which is one of the brightest stars in the night sky, not the brightest. Sirius is the brightest, but it is the closest star to our star. And Virgo has a very bright star named Spica that we can see strongly throughout the month. So find some time to look up and connect with that which we can actually see. I'm also not going to read this, but you guys are more than welcome to take a screenshot and come back and read this later. This is the page for what's going on in the sky this month. What I did want to point out was the first line. It says that May is the time for the best view of the sky from the North Star to the Southern Cross, meaning we can see both of these points at the same time, and it's ideal viewing for astronomers. It says that Leo moves west with the realm of galaxies trailing him. So that very, very, very dense area of galaxies known as the realm of galaxies. And like I said, you can go ahead and read more of this later if you'd like. We're gonna touch on some of this stuff as we go. Oh, we'll come back for our cards. Okay, let's go to the chart. I am really I'm going to go off of the calendar I made. I have some interpretations, but you guys, my chart, I don't even know how to express how much stuff is happening in my own personal natal chart right now. It's being like lit up like a Christmas tree. I was all over the place with this, finding like way too many different connections, and I had to like reel it back. So we're just going to kind of roll with it. I hope this video is not too long. But yeah, so today is the 4th. We had a couple of pretty significant things happen here at the start of the month that I do want to cover before we move on, right? So we're going to go back a little bit. On the 2nd, we had Venus enter Aries. We also, thank you, Sam, over at Find Me in the Stars Astrology. I only know this from her post. I put it in my chart afterwards, but I only know this because of her post. On the 2nd, we also had the asteroid Medusa station retrograde. This is really significant for a multitude of reasons that we're going to touch on here in a second. But before we get there, I want to kind of just talk about Venus entering Aries. Look to see where Aries falls in your chart, what house that might be. This house is going to be extremely activated throughout this month because not only do we have Venus coming in on the 2nd, but we will have both Jupiter and Mars enter into the sign, all of which will oppose the super galactic center. You can look to the calendar to see the specific days. We'll get there as we go along, but they'll all oppose the super galactic center, and Jupiter and Mars will conjunct, all here within the beginning degrees of Aries, actually literally all on top of my North Node in the 8th house, or the 7th house if it's Placidus, and Placidus is the 7th house, but I tend to think it's much more 8th housey placement. But anyway, this is all going to be happening in a sign that is governed by Aries. This is cardinal initiatory energy that sparks things into being. Jupiter transiting in here later this month, that is literally going to feel like a rebirth of our higher self. So Jupiter is a very interesting planet. Our sun is, our more solar egoic consciousness. It takes 1 year to transit around the zodiac, spending 1 month in each of the 12 signs, while Jupiter takes 12 years to transit around the zodiac, spending 1 year in each sign. The sun is like, think about it, it's more like egoic consciousness. It's like, I only need a month. I figured it out. I've learned all the lessons and I'm on to the next thing. And Jupiter is like, okay. Jupiter rules the 9th house. It rules academia. It rules studying. It rules higher education. Jupiter is like, I want to actually grow and expand. And so I'm going to spend a year here and I'm going to really focus and dial in on this area of existence and I'm going to blow it up. I'm going to expand it. I'm going to push it forward. That's Jupiter. Well, Jupiter is just gone all the way around the zodiac back home to Pisces, to the cosmic womb, where he met Neptune in the most Piscean year of our entire freaking existence. Conjuncts, has this huge aha connection to the vastness of it all. And now it is being reborn in the sign of Aries. Look to see what house, type in the chat if you guys know what house Aries falls for you, because this is where you're really going to be feeling it. We already started to feel this push just 2 days ago when Venus entered into Aries. It was like a foreshadowing of what's to come. Venus is the planet of balance and values and aesthetic and harmony and relationships and that which we love and other people. And Aries is the sign of the self. And so we're having this entanglement happen in our house that is very much ruled by identity consciousness and the planet that very much governs our others and how they can help us grow and expand all the things that I just listed. Carolyn says it's her 6th house. So that's the house of service. That's the house of health, of the body, balancing our body, our mind. It's ruled by Virgo and it's ruled by Mercury. So it has a lot to do with learning and information, but all of that is done for others in service. It has a lot to do with duties and responsibilities. Janelle says it's in her 5th house, so that is the house of romance. So Venus there in Aries is very passionate, and Mars coming in later is really going to spice things up. It's also the house of children and our personal creative passions, that which we came to spark and give life to. It's ruled by Leo, and so it has a lot to do with where we came to shine our light and express ourselves creatively, and our kids too as well, and our inner child. Samara says she needs to figure that out. Okay, we'll figure it out and you let us know. She says she has the rebel here with me. Hers is in the 10th house. Oh, you have rebel there with you. Oh, hi, rebel. Hers is in the 10th. That's your house of career, of purpose. You're really feeling a rebirth and expansion when it comes there. And also like how you're seen in the public. And Carolyn, you're like me. It's in your 8th house. That is the house of the occult, of astrology, of the shadow, of projections, of that which is hidden, the mysteries, the other side of the veil. This is all literally happening right on top of my north node, opposite my sun and my south node. And Janelle says she has Venus and Mercury there too. So it's your Venus return. So you could find the exact moment of your Venus return if you'd like. Over on astro.com. It's like a smaller planetary return, but you're really feeling that Venusian energy come, and it's speaking your language. And so if you're feeling the need to push forward aesthetically or artistically or creatively or in some area of relationships or values, like go for it because it's aligned with yours. We got a lot of retrogrades happening this month, but like also we can't help but be moved forward with a lot of the energy happening between the eclipse and all this stuff here transiting into Aries, like like you know how we felt at spring where we're all just like, oh, we can just move now. Like we're feeling that again, and it's going to be a little planetary stellium coming to that house. Okay, so Venus moved into Aries. We're going to be here all night. I don't know how to not go on forever. Okay, these moved in Aries. Medusa, the asteroid, stationed retrograde, which is super significant because it's stationed retrograde right next to Atlantis, who also stations retrograde this month. I guess we're just going to bounce around, you guys. And the Galactic Center. So this is very interesting to me. We had Medusa station retrograde on the 2nd, right before an eclipse that falls aligned with Algol, which is the head of Medusa. We're going to be diving very deep into the Medusa archetype for the next moon over on Patreon. But I find it interesting that she's so a focus. She's so a focus this month. So she stations retrograde on the 2nd. She actually conjuncts Atlantis on the 8th. And then Atlantis stations retrograde on the 14th. And that all happens here up at the top of the chart, right? Those of you who are Patreon members, you might remember the whole video that I did on this concept of the axis mundi and this polar pillar, this polar axis that sits here at the top and bottom of the chart. That is the galactic center opposite the pole star. And we dove very deep into so much of the mythology around this concept that is depicted through countless mythologies, whether it's a tree or a pole or a ladder or whatever it may be. It's this polar pillar that keeps us aligned, right? And this Atlantis and Medusa retrograde is going to be happening right on top of this point, and they both are going to transit back over the galactic center. So I find this extremely interesting. You guys, we're just going to bounce around. I was going to go in chronological order, but it's eclipse season. Time and space, beyond time and space. We're just going to talk. Okay, so if you guys have been following along with my posts, all my stories over on Patreon, you may have seen me post about an exciting new discovery that is supposed to be announced on the 12th. I actually wrote that here on the calendar. It's the red thing there on the 12th. It says Galactic Center announcement, ? The same scientists, which, fun fact, we have a woman directly responsible for this discovery, the science behind, I think it's the math behind the technology used to get the first picture of a black hole, which we got back in 2019, which was a picture of the super galactic center, which falls here at 2 degrees of Libra. Interesting that this month we have all these planets having this huge conjunction opposite that. The day of that announcement, the moon will be transiting this point. And the day of the announcement on the 12th, the moon will be transiting the supergalactic center. And we also have all these asteroids transiting over the galactic center. So back in 2019, we got an image of the super galactic center, M87. I actually have a picture of it here on my necklace. It aligns with my sun. This is the black hole. It's actually an entire galaxy. M87 is a galaxy itself. That our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, the Andromeda galaxy, and a whole bunch of other galaxies rotate around. It's a super massive black hole. It's extremely far away, much more farther away than the galactic center. But yet this was the first image we ever got, because the galactic center is very hard to see. We can't see it. It sits in an area of the sky that is littered with stars. We, here, Earth, we are on the outer arm of a spiral galaxy, and we're on what's known as the Orion arm of the Milky Way, and it's like the outer rim. And so for us to see to the middle, we have to look through so much literal light. We're literally blinded by the light, and unable to see the center, which symbolically is so significant. And let me tell you why. Okay. So, historically speaking, when new scientific discoveries have been made, planetary wise, those archetypes are then assimilated almost immediately into our collective consciousness. We see this happen a lot when Uranus was discovered. Uranus governs technology. Ironically, we needed a telescope to find him. It governs advancements in industry and technology and revolutions and enlightenment. And these are all things that in sciences, these are all things that we've seen a flood of after the discovery of Uranus in the 1800s. The same thing for when Neptune was discovered. We had a flood of mysticism. Pluto was discovered in 1930, right before Hitler took, I guess it's not office. What are you when you're a Führer? Took a hold of his whole country as a dictator. And then we had the World War II, and then we dropped the bombs and killed more people than Hitler ever did. And all of that death and power and war, all of which is governed by Pluto. Then in 2005, we discovered Eris, which sits outside of Pluto. Eris is the female counterpart to Pluto, very much so. It is that feminine rage, that Mars and Pluto, deeply chaotic feminine energy, which we saw an onslaught of after 2005. I don't know about you ladies, but I'm a little pissed off. And then after that, we discovered the supergalactic center. Before 2019, black holes were theoretical. Like, people have been talking about them for a really long time, but nobody actually could prove that they existed until we finally got a picture of the supergalactic center back in 2019. Ironically, that was because this happened right on top of my son. Like 2019 was the first year that I was like, had a sense of who I was and what I was supposed to be doing. This point aligns with our equinox points. The supergalactic center aligns with our sun during the spring equinox and the autumn equinox. It is a point of balance and harmony and oneness with something greater. It holds all of these galaxies together. It is very much focused on unity. And around that time, I had very profound spiritual, very intense and profound spiritual experiences that very much revolved around that sense of oneness with all and this like vastness, where you almost lose your sense of identity in the process, right? And then after that, it was coming back into this, who am I? And I think we all kind of experienced that from that point on. You know, many of us have come to the conclusion that we are one with all that is, balancing between light and dark, unity and harmony and oneness and all this jazz. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've all kind of been there over that time. The collective has. Not everybody, but those of us who are on some tip, right? And we're aligning with these higher archetypes of these points, right? These more galactic archetypes. I also think you need to have kind of started to project your consciousness beyond the confines of the solar system and this physical earthly reality to already start to, you know, tap into what sits beyond to kind of feel these, if that makes sense. Well, now it's believed that we may have gotten a picture of the center of the Milky Way galaxy. The information that's being leaked out about this discovery that they're going to announce at 10 a.m. on May 12th, I don't know why so far in the future, but they're making a really big deal about it. The information that's leaked out is that it's coming from the exact same scientists who made this discovery. They've been studying this black hole for the last couple of years, and they have information in regards to the center of our galaxy. Whether it's going to be a picture, I don't know, but whatever it is a new scientific discovery, and whether scientists know it or not, the discoveries that they make help propel the collective consciousness forward. Especially if we start to assimilate them into astrology with all of these extra points. And so we have this happening here this month. And both of these asteroids will be transiting over it. I think it's super interesting that Atlantis was probably transiting over it for the first time when, maybe not when the discovery was being made, because I know they do this like a couple of years out and then they compile several years worth of data together, usually for these pictures. But at least when all the preparations were being made for their special announcement, and during the time when they were announcing it to us, the public, that they have a future announcement, Atlantis was transiting over this point. So is Medusa. Medusa has a lot to do with what was hidden. What was repressed. She is the shunned, repressed feminine that we can't see because we're blinded by the light of patriarchy, which is what's so interesting about this point. So while the supergalactic center aligns with our with our equinox points and our periods of balance and union between opposites, the equinoxes, where we have a balance between light and dark, day and night, our sun aligns with the galactic center during the solstice points. So here it aligns through conjunction at the winter solstice, and here it aligns through conjunction at the summer solstice. Our periods of extreme polarity, peak light or peak darkness. And I think it's very interesting that we can't see the center of our own galaxy because we're literally blinded by this onset of light, this huge rim of light. We can't see the center of ourselves. Many of us can sense that we are connected to the vastness of all that is. The supergalactic center has really been activated within us, and we understand that we are like one with Source and one with God, but we still reside within this polarity. You know what I mean? We still have these extreme polarities within us that are activated. And I think a lot of what this discovery and the integration of it within our consciousness is going to revolve around is one, the integration of both the wisdom and lessons that both extremities hold. So the wisdoms and lessons of the extreme realms of darkness, and the wisdom and lessons of the extreme realms of light, understanding that they hold a place, and then also being able to kind of like find the middle within, which is ultimately something that, you know, didn't happen in Atlantis. I think they were there for a while at the Golden Age, but this is the retrograde is going to tell, we are redoing something connected to that time, the split, the divide, the union that needs to occur. This also has Medusa here as well. That split was the split from the feminine, and it was ultimately done because we were blinded by the light, and we forgot where we came from. We forgot the center source of it all, this cosmic womb, the vastness of the void, right? So I know I went off on a whole tip, and we're gonna continue on this tip for a second because I want to give you a couple of dates for these retrograde while we're here. I know we're like moving all around, you guys. We're just gonna have to roll with me on this. So, like I said, Atlantis will station retrograde on the 14th, the day before our blood moon. It will station retrograde at, I think, like 4 degrees of Capricorn. And then it will transit back over the galactic center. It will conjunct the galactic center a couple of days after the solstice. So it will align with the galactic center in opposition to the sun. So it's going to be a really big alignment with the galactic center. It's actually going to be exact on June 26th. The solstice is somewhere around the 21st. That's going to be like literally right on top of Eddie's sun. So it will conjunct the galaxy around the solstice, and then it will station direct on top of the head of Ophiuchus at 21 degrees of Sagittarius on July 31st, which is my kid's birthday. And another one of the high holidays, it's known as First Harvest, and it falls between the summer solstice and the autumn equinox. It's the middle point between those two. So I find it interesting that all of the dates connected to Atlantis retrograde are very strongly connected to these solstice points, the wheel of the year, the cycles, and particularly the ones connected to the light, because this is going to revolve around this area around Beltane to the summer solstice to first harvest, that peak of light. The same time that we're hopefully piercing the veil of light so we can see back to the womb from which we came, if that makes sense. Okay, so those are the dates surrounding around the Atlantis retrograde. I just wanted to touch that here while we're on this tip. Okay, so I know we went off on a tip, but we're just going to kind of move forward to, I guess, probably today. Today, Venus actually makes its exact opposition to the supergalactic center. And then later this month, it will conjunct the Andromeda vertex. So Venus is aligning with two different black holes this month. One in the sign of the self, opposite our black hole of union between opposites in the sign of the other. And then once again, later this month, aligning with the center black hole of our galaxy that represents the other, because it is our Milky Way's divine partner. They will one day collide. And so this enmeshment between the self, its expansion, and the partnerships that happen between other people in our reality are very strongly highlighted this month and like galactically propelled, if that makes sense. We really started feeling that today. I'm not going to cover all of the sextiles and stuff. I just want to kind of cover the, like, you know, the key aspects. Okay, so tomorrow is a really big day, you guys. Tomorrow, the sun is going to align with Uranus. Okay, so we've been feeling this since the Taurus eclipse. Samara, if you want to post a picture of your chart in the Discord and just like at everyone, I'm sure Janelle can help you figure out. Oh, you figured it out. Oh, 10th house. It's your 10th house. I think we count backwards. It doesn't have a number there for you. Take a screenshot of the chart that I used in the session, the video that I sent you, or I think I emailed you one, and use that one, and it should have the numbers here in the little wheel. But the 10th house, if it is your 10th house, that's your house of career and purpose and public standing, and also like the father and authority figures and things like that too. But if you need help, I bet you Janelle could help you. She knows her stuff. Okay. We've been feeling this Sun-Uranus conjunction since at least the eclipse, but, you know, a little bit longer than that. And it's going to be exact tomorrow. This happens once a year. Once a year, the sun comes around and aligns with Uranus, which is a slower moving planet. Okay, yeah, post over on Discord. And this is always considered like the mad genius transit. This is when like our wire, and this is pre-Mercury retrograde, so Mercury will be direct, the planet of communication, but this is when we are like plugged into the other side, and like insights and inspiration and progressive concepts are just come easily to us, and we're able to kind of like put the pieces together. And I always look at it as like the mad genius transit, where we are just attuned to brilliance and insights and ideas designed to push us forward. Now, this energy on a collective stage is really volatile and extremely like rebellious and hostile and liberating, but you know, they always know when this is happening, and they tend to orchestrated revolutions to kind of hijack, like much like we were talking about in the last Patreon video about orchestrated pandemonium during eclipse seasons in order to mitigate any sort of unexpected pandemonium that might happen to their established order. Same thing happens around Uranus Sun conjunctions, or really Uranus transits in general, is you'll see something on the world stage kind of unfold. We see this happening right now with the Roe versus Wade overturn, which, you know, honestly is like written in the stars. So thank you to the Galactic Mystic. She's really great, and she has a fabulous blog. I think her website is thegalacticmystic.com. I also follow her on Instagram, but her posts are really great, you guys. She pulled the chart for when Roe versus Wade was first made a law, or a court, like the court hearing came through. I guess I don't know if it's a law. I think they won in court or whatever it may be. Mercury was actually right here. Mercury was at 28 degrees of Pluto, and we had Pluto station retrograde right on top of both America's natal Pluto and the Mercury of when Roe versus Wade was instilled. Or I don't know the right terminology for whatever it is. It's not a law, right? What is it? Somebody tell me. Okay, so we see how astrology, these cycles come back around, and we're going to have Mercury retrograde this month, redoing contracts, and the sun will be aligning with Uranus, the planet of rebellion and revolution, and they're really trying to gear that rebellion and revolution towards a certain narrative. I'm not saying that narrative is not important. I'm actually trying to keep my views to myself on this one. I have mixed views about everything, so I'll just keep that one to myself. But they're definitely trying to gear the collective in a certain direction. Now, this, while it can be hostile and unpredictable and erratic, and oftentimes Uranus is actually connected more to the right wing of politics. So we can also kind of expect to see some crazy shit happen on that side too. But this is also helping us to liberate ourselves from fixed systems in order to build new systems. And in order to do this, we have to have moments of brilliance. And tomorrow is definitely a moment of brilliance day. So if you have just like, aha, yes, or like moments of insight or inspiration or synchronicity or anything unexpected that might lead to any of those things unfold tomorrow, like I would jump on some of those things if they feel and sit right with you, because it's the day for that. She posted it in Discord. Oh, yeah, dude, I feel you. I got all that too. I feel you. I feel you on that. Astrology is like the one language I understand. But everything else, I'm like, what does this word say? How do you pronounce this? Like, in the fucking, that reading I did in that last book, I was struggling so hard to say coagulatio, which now I can say because I looked it up. Oh my god. Anyway, where we're at. Okay, so on the 8th, we'll have Medusa, who's already stationed retrograde, conjunct Atlantis, who is yet to station retrograde on the 8th. And so I think that a lot of what, that's just a couple of days before the announcement about that center of our galaxy, which is pretty interesting. 2 days before Mercury stations retrograde too. Look to see where Capricorn falls in your chart. Capricorn is the sign of authority, capitalism. It governs the pyramidal structure of hierarchy, everything that sits above us or has dominion over us. It rules our, systems of reality, and also the initiatory process, the karmic, because it's Saturn ruled, the karmic initiatory process that ultimately frees us from that. And we have this Medusa Atlantis conjunction happening here and then over the galactic center in that sign. And so it has a lot to do with our placement within those systems. Now this is going to revolve a lot, not necessarily around this life, but we will see mirroring of it in this lifetime. But a lot of this, especially because of the Atlantis placement, is going to stem from the past. All of this Pisces action also has us really rooted, and so does the eclipse season, has us really rooted in other time periods. Like I said earlier, we're in this weird sort of like portal between time and space where all of these timelines cross. And it's almost like that is why so much transformation is done during eclipse season, is because we're purging and healing cycles upon cycles. We talked a lot in the last video, I think it was on Patreon, about the different cycles of eclipses and how great they really are and how large they really are and how they're connected to these huge stories that span generations. All this Pisces action, Pisces governs past lives, it governs the 12th house, which is our dreams, our unconscious, the archetypal realm, these mythologies that are trying to help us understand this vast story. It governs the mystical, the spiritual, the unseen, and that where we came from, where whatever came before. So all of this stuff is really bubbling up. But looking to see where Capricorn rules for you might help you to kind of understand where this is falling for you. Oh, you got Capricorn in the 8th. Oh, so your transformations are very karmic and intense. And like, it's literally, you feel like it's your responsibility to transform. But in doing so, especially throughout this month, you're helping us heal these huge collective timelines that span all the way back to Atlantis and probably before, probably other planets, probably other realities, other dimensions. And it's this deep, deep, deeply repressed feminine wound of Medusa, which is falling here in Capricorn, the sign of the literal patriarchy. Like literally, that's what Capricorn would govern. Even though really it itself governing the patriarchy is a fucking lie, because it is an earth sign. It's a feminine sign in and of itself, and we've talked about that over on Patreon too. Okay, so we'll cover this a lot more over on Patreon, but Medusa is very representative of this like deep, deep, deep feminine wound. The feminine being rejected by the feminine in the name of patriarchy. and it has a lot to do with rape and the feminine goddess turning her back on the wounded feminine in favor of the patriarchal path forward. And so we see it falling in Capricorn, really aligning with those archetypes very strongly. Okay, where are we at here? And on that day, the same day that Atlantis conjuncts Medusa, the moon will transit over a star in Draco. And it's actually the star in Draco that falls in Leo. So Draco is a really interesting constellation because it falls so close to the pole star. We have Polaris, which falls here opposite the galactic center, part of that axis mundi, that polar pillar, that both extremes, but are ultimately seeking balance in between. The earth sits here in the middle, right? It's a balance between in our body and our mind. What was I saying? Oh, okay. So we have the pole star here in the middle, and then we have Draco, the dragon, which encircles the celestial pole. And so there is a star of Draco in almost every single constellation. Maybe there is in every single sign. There's a star in Draco in every single sign. Don't quote me on that. There might be one that there isn't. There might not be one in Scorpio. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But in almost every single sign, there's a star in Draco because it encircles the celestial pole, and so it falls in all of them. And so it's interesting that the moon, our feminine, that which reflects back to us so we can see and internalize, transmute, integrate, understand on an internal level, on an emotional level, on an intuitive level, on an empathic level, on a compassionate level. The moon will be transiting over the star in Draco that falls in Leo. So if I were to pick two signs that govern this patriarchal, polarized, masculine, authoritarian, egoic consciousness of like light is right, or like men are greater, or whatever it may be, you know what I mean? It would be Leo, which rules like royalty, and Capricorn, which rules capitalism and hierarchy and authority figures. So it's interesting that reflection there is happening simultaneously. Okay, where are we at next? You have Capricorn in your second house. So that has a lot to do with like your self-worth, your security, your finances, your foundation, your feeling of safety and security. And being as Capricorn, you need a lot of like structures in order to feel all those things to your liking. For me, it is my fifth house of romance and children and my passions and what lights me up. Okay. Where are we at now? On the 10th, Mercury stations retrograde. Okay, this is very interesting, Mercury retrograde. Let me tell you why. Okay, so first, some dates. Mercury stations retrograde on the 10th at 4 degrees of Gemini. Where's Gemini for you? This is where you're going to be feeling it. You're actually going to be feeling it in both the sign ruled by Gemini and Taurus, because Mercury is not he or she, because Mercury stations retrograde at 4 degrees on the 10th. It will transit all the way back to 26 degrees of Taurus, which ironically, this degree mark right here, this is Algol. This is Medusa's head, the constellation that is Medusa's head, the same point that our blood moon will be aligned with. Mercury retrograde will transit in opposition. It will transit, no, not in opposition to that. Okay. But it will transit all the way back to 26 degrees, and it will be conjunct both Hecate. Again, Hecate has a lot to do with the three-faced goddess. She has integrated her in all of her manifestations, and then she's there as a guide to help guide us through the underworld, or really any world, any other world. She really governs the other realms, so that to help us find these lost aspects of the self on a quest back to sovereignty. I do know that there are like a lot of witches who like try to invoke her as a deity and like honor her through like offerings. And you know, I'm sure she's not going to turn them down, but what she's really, really, really about is the transformation of the self and the reclaiming of your own sovereignty and the finding of her within you as not an outside deity or entity, but this power of magic and wisdom and power that resides deep within some of our darkest places. And it's interesting that Mercury will transit over both Hecate and then Algol again, who is so highlighted this month. Medusa is everywhere, from the asteroid here to the blood moon aligning with her to Mercury retrograde transiting all the way back to her. This area is very much going to be a focus. So looking to see what you have around these degrees might help you to understand how this retrograde cycle will affect you. And those are the houses ruled by both Gemini and Taurus. So Mercury will station direct on July 3rd at 26 degrees of Taurus, exactly conjunct the head of Medusa. No, Mercury's not in Aquarius right now. No? But hi, Maverick. Okay, so Mercury will transit back over to there. And then right after this retrograde, both Saturn and Mercury and Neptune will station retrograde. And so this is really setting us forward on this retrograde, like, what's it called? Like baton. Like what's it called when you like pass the baton? Relay race. A retrograde relay race. And so looking to see what Mercury really wants you to focus on is going to help you to see what this is about. Okay, so stations retrograde on the 10th. This is the same day that Jupiter enters Aries. So Mercury will station retrograde, and then Jupiter will enter Aries later that day. So I'm going to move to the 11th. So we see it here. So we're really going to be feeling this expansion happen in whatever sign, whatever house Aries rules in your chart. Jupiter is the planet of expansion. Wherever he comes, he expands. He helps grow. He helps push us forward. Not always, especially in Aries. Aries is reckless and Jupiter expands. Jupiter is one of astrology's benefics, and it's said that whenever he's involved, so is benefit, like it's to our benefit, but he can tend to get carried away. And with Jupiter and Aries, it can be like grandiose plans of action that are just like taken with no regard for forethought. Any forethought. And this can be really good, especially if we're running off of a Sun Uranus insight. This could be really good. It could also be really bad, and we could burn out and we could jump without thinking in very grandiose ways, and it can backfire on us because Jupiter's kind of like go big or go home, and sometimes he just blows things up, especially when Mars comes by later to conjunct Jupiter in this sign. We got to be careful not to go overboard, so keep that in mind. Push forward, expand, but try not to go overboard, and try to think beforehand. Remember, Mercury is retrograde. So we are going to be redoing, reassessing, revisiting It's not ideal time to start new things because that chart of whatever it is you start will have a Mercury retrograde chart. Like let's say you started a business. Well, that business is always going to have Mercury retrograde natally. So you don't really want to be starting anything new. What you want to do is you want to dive deeper into, expand the things that were initiated at the beginning of spring, at the equinox. Venus, the planet of aesthetic, of art, of beauty, of creativity, is coming to lend aid to whatever all that was. Jupiter is coming to expand and push you forward. Neptune, he's not there yet, but Mars is coming to give us action and motivation in regards to that area of our life. So rather than try to push forward with new ventures, try to funnel. It will be hard. All of this here wants to push forward with new things, and this here wants to push forward with new things too. Try to funnel that energy into fine tuning some of the things you've already sparked into being, if that makes sense. Amanda says, first house of the self. Definitely going to be mindful of going too hard. Yes, definitely want to be mindful of going too hard. Azul says, what if you have Jupiter retrograde in the second? So I have Jupiter retrograde in the 8th. Both the second house and the 8th house have a lot to do with money. I've come to the conclusion that I will probably always be broke. But Jupiter retrograde is a really great placement. Jupiter is the planet that helps us learn and expand our higher philosophical mind. So when you have Jupiter retrograde natally, everything has to be learned through personal experience. Like, you probably read books. We like books. Books are cool. But I don't ever take anything that I learn from any person anywhere on face value. Everything is internalized and learned through personal experience, personal learning, and that's how we grow. We grow through deep internal transformations. For you in the 6th house, in the 2nd house, it has a lot to do with your safety and your security and your finances and your values. We'd have to look and see like what other kind of aspects and things are going on, but it's internalized growth, maybe through the benefit or strain of resources, because the 2nd house governs resources, but deep internal growth, Jupiter retrograde. I know it well. Mine's in the 8th house. It's very deep. It's in Aries. Conjunct the Andromeda galaxy. So other people are very much entangled in my internal growth. Jesus. Okay. All right, where are we at? What is the 11th? We talked about that. Okay, so the same day that Mercury stations retrograde and Jupiter enters Aries. And so we're having this rebirth of the higher self. And because we're having this rebirth, of the higher expansive philosophical self, Jupiter and Mercury are both mental planets. They govern the signs that sit opposite each other. Well, somewhat. So Jupiter governs Sagittarius, our higher philosophical academic mind that pushes us to learn vast, complicated subjects and then ideally teach them. That's also the sign that writes books and helps guide others, right? And I'm like stuttering. Mercury governs Gemini. It's actually at home in Gemini when it stations retrograde. And this is more of our analytical, logical mind. This governs like learning like a remedial school, like elementary school, like the basics, right? And so both of these have much to do with the mind and how we process, learn, think, and on that mental battlefield. So the fact that Jupiter, our higher mind, is reborn in Aries from the cosmic womb of Pisces where it saw so much. It's going to dip back in here. It's going to station retrograde and dip back in. But this month we have it in Aries. And we're having this rebirth of the higher self. That will automatically cause us to reassess this lower mind, this lower logical, analytical thinking mind, in order to make room for this new trek around the zodiac, this new incarnation, this new evolution, this new initiation into the vastness of the self, if that makes sense. So these are happening simultaneously with the moon transiting over the asteroid Psyche, the asteroid Alexandria, and the main star in Draco, the dragon. So that's what's really being reflected to us on a subconscious level. Psyche in mythology is the first human to ever be ascended to godhood and able to live upon Mount Olympus. But it does not come without deep in trials and tribulations, and it's in Virgo, it's sacrifice and initiations and pain and integration and the accessing of wisdom. We think very much about Psyche being the mind, especially because of the realm of psychology. These planetary bodies also having major transits that day are very much revolved around the mind. But Psyche in Latin translates to the word soul. And it is very much connected to that which sits beyond the psyche and back to the soul. And that is why her story is about integrating these deep psychic wounds, and in doing so, awakening our soul. Transiting over Alexandria, in doing all this internal processing, it helps us to unlock deep lost, forgotten, hidden, occulted, ancient knowledge. Alexandria and the Library of Alexandria in Egypt is very much connected to that which is lost, forgotten to time, but it can only be recovered by us traversing that which is everything, which is our consciousness and the source that we are birthed from, right? And then we also have it transiting over the main star in Draco that day, which is that dragon constellation, which governs all that needs to be integrated, but then all that can be unlocked once it is. The shadow and the projections, and also the wisdom and knowledge that can be obtained through the alchemical process of integrating our lower nature, right? Okay. So on the 12th, we have that announcement from the scientists. I'm really excited about this, you guys. I really am a firm believer that when these discoveries happen, something happens within our collective consciousness. I will be able to interpret this point more. You know what I mean? There will be something more will come through about our existence as not just a planet that revolves around the sun, but a sun that revolves around a black hole, and what that means for us on a greater scale. This is expansive energy for our entire collective conscious, and a lot of people are going to be paying attention to it. This is going to be like it was last time when this picture was taken, front news everywhere on Muggle TV, like everybody's going to be paying attention to it. And so those of us who are plugged into the mystical unseen realm, we need to make sure that we're finding balance and harmony throughout that day, because like I had said, this point aligns with our periods of extreme polarity, which has its benefit, but it also is always seeking balance between extremes. Which is going to be so hard for us this month. You guys, this month is intense. It's extreme all over. And the same day that we will find out whatever they know about this point, the moon will transit this point, reflecting back that which we already know. They already have a picture of the super galactic center. And we have been connecting deeper as a collective with others, you know what I mean? The other side. This concept of balance between light and dark. This concept of moving beyond duality, of integration, of alchemy. All concepts that were lost to time ultimately are only really spoken about in like weird esoteric circles, you know what I mean? And nowadays it's kind of regular lingo in spiritual realms, at least, you know what I mean? People understand this concept. Well, now this is going to be happening more internally, more within our own personal consciousness, as opposed to the collective consciousness. If that makes sense. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. Okay. Okay, on the 13th. On the 13th, the sun is going to conjunct the north node. So much like the sun conjuncting Uranus, this entire month is going to feel like one giant eclipse, because the energy of the last eclipse we're still feeling, and the energy of the next eclipse we feel onward, if that makes sense. So earlier in the month we felt the Sun-Uranus conjunction, which was part of the last Taurus eclipse, and now the sun finally makes it to the north node on May 13th. So this is really highlighting whatever it is this eclipse story is about for you. So now is when you look to see where the signs of Taurus and Scorpio fall in your chart. This is where the eclipses will be falling over this 18-month period. We are about 6 months into this eclipse story, so we've already seen it starting to kind of play out. We're having our first kind of like huge illumination and culmination happen on the 15th when we have our Scorpio blood moon. And so that's when we're really going to start to see what this is about. But this Sun-Uranus conjunction and then this Sun-North Node conjunction in whatever house this is, for me, this is my 9th house. This is just like screaming at me to write my book. Write your book, write your book, write your book. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do it. I'm going to use Mercury retrograde, which is in Gemini, the sign of information, to go and reassess, redo, reconfigure, revisit a lot of my old information, which is all governed by Gemini, in order to compile it together, which is also partially governed by Gemini, in the hopes of trying to accumulate some stuff that I've already done, that's Mercury, and compile it into what this is yelling at me for to do and get done before I'm too busy and I can't do it. But for you, because it's in my 9th house, which is the house that has a lot to do with reading books, writing books, and teaching through books and education, as some sort of guide. But for me, it's in Taurus, so I have to do this practically. And so practically is I need to talk clear and concise enough for you guys to be able to grasp what I'm saying so you can do it yourself, because that's the kind of guide and teacher I am. I'm here to teach you how to do it yourself. So I want to give you, Taurus, all the practical, physical, tangible things that you need in order to do it. And so I need to go back through. So that's for me. But for you, this is happening somewhere else. And this Sun North Node conjunction on the 13th will help give you insight to what this is about. So much like the Sun-Uranus conjunction tomorrow, this conjunction is something to pay attention to for things coming through, insights coming through, clarity coming through, aha moments coming through, new paths opening that push you in a new direction in this area of your life. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to, that's the same day as our full moon, blood moon live stream, by the way. So if you want to dive deep into the Scorpio blood moon with us, you can join Patreon and the link is below. Okay, I'm done with my spiel. Okay, so I don't normally put the moon's transit into the signs on this calendar because there's not enough room. I usually just do the moon's alignment with stars. But I did put that the moon enters Scorpio on the 14th because I think it's important, because it's where the eclipse is going to be. And so we're really going to be feeling that all throughout the weekend leading up to the eclipse. It's just going to feel like one long eclipse between the sun aligning with the north node, the moon entering into Scorpio where it will be for the blood moon. We're feeling it all throughout the weekend. And so I just want you to kind of know that going into it. If you feel like you need to rest, Taurus needs to rest. Take it easy. We're processing a lot on a physical, bodily level, because that's Taurus. Taurus literally governs our physical body. Also the throat, so we might be processing a lot through our mouths. Not that it'll make much sense with Mercury retrograde, but go for it. And the moon then transiting through Scorpio is really helping us to dig deep and transmute all that is deeply hidden within the shadows. So the 14th, not only do we have the moon enter Scorpio, but it's also the same day that Atlantis retrograde begins. So the eclipse is going to revolve very heavily around this Mercury retrograde and this Atlantis retrograde. Both had just kicked off. So looking to see where those fall in your chart will help give you a little bit of insight of how your specific cosmic lens, which is your chart, is experiencing this collective energy. Okay, so on the 15th is the Scorpio blood moon. The moon actually falls at, I guess I didn't put the time here. It's right here. (9:14 p.m. Pacific Standard Time), and it actually falls at 25 degrees and 18 minutes of Scorpio. I'm just gonna put it to the right time. What did I say? 9:14? Okay. It actually falls at 25 degrees of Scorpio, with the sun conjunct Algol, the star of Medusa's head. This is going to be an archetype we're going to dive into heavily over on Patreon. It's also conjunct Hecate, the sun is. And the moon and the south node are both aligned with Serpents, which is the serpent in the hands of Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is the serpent bearer. He is the constellation that sits here with his foot on the galactic center, and he is taming the serpent so that the two of them together can reach for the crown and be united and sovereign and ideally unlock whatever this is. The moon is really reflecting that serpent energy to our consciousness. We see it in a multitude of places, several of which we've already talked about. And so this archetype of the serpent and the mysteries connected to it are something we're going to dive into pretty deeply for the blood moon eclipse video over on Patreon. Again, you guys can get access to this for like $3. So we're going to be talking about Medusa, Serpents, the mythology of Andromeda and Perseus, which is strongly connected to Medusa's mythology. They are intertwined. It is actually Medusa's wound and the transmutation of it that saves Andromeda from the chains that bind her ultimately. We're also going to be diving into the 8th house mysteries, which are governed by Scorpio and are being illuminated, the depths and the hidden parts of them, by this blood moon eclipse. And we'll talk on eclipses and blood moons in particularly as well. This is a very, very intense moon, you guys. This moon is trining Mars. So it is. Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio. Before Pluto was discovered, Mars ruled Scorpio. And so the ruler of Scorpio is trining this blood moon, and it is giving it so much fiery support, lending so much fiery aid to the deep alchemical transformations, deeply alchemical and karmic transformations that are happening, because this moon is square Saturn. The sun will and the moon will both be square Saturn at the time of this eclipse, and this is bringing in those deep karmic initiations and harsh confrontations with reality. And a lot of these can be coming from the collective consciousness, because Saturn is transiting through Aquarius right now. And so it's transiting through the sign of the collective, of the larger groups, of the hive mind structures that we find all around us, these little group minds that work to push us forward, but we all have competing ideals and visions for the future, which is all ruled by Aquarius, both our ideals and our visions for the future. And so Saturn, the planet of structure and authority, both our own authority and outside authority, will be square this moon. And so we're really going to be feeling triggers from that planet. It's intense. It's karmic. Eclipses are already karmic, fated, destined. And now we have the planet of karma and initiatory tests square this moon. We'll dive deeper into the greater archetypal landscape on Patreon as we expand out, and we'll look to find harmony where we can. But for now, on the surface level, it's looking intense, guys. It's looking very intensely transformative, which can be, kind of brutal or kind of beautiful. Kind of depends on how you navigate this. I pulled some cards later that will help us discuss. I have so much stuff going on here, guys. I gotta move some things. I pulled some cards later that will help us to kind of figure out how to navigate the intensity of the month. Okay, so not only do we have this moon trining Mars and squaring Saturn, but it's also trining Neptune, and so it has this deeply mystical, illusionary, symbolic, unseen aspect to it that's really helping us to tap into these realm of illusion, which is deeply rooted in mystic truths, if you can speak the realm of abstract symbolism. If you can navigate the unseen realm without taking it too seriously, we can really unlock a lot of deep, esoteric insights during this time. And of course, it falls opposite. The North Node conjunct the South Node, and so a lot of things are bubbling up from the past in order to be addressed. We see this with Atlantis retrograde happening at the top of the chart over the Galactic center. We see this with a lot of the retrogrades asking us to dive into that which has already transpired. And then this South Node, the South Node is always plugged into the past, all of the past. And being as though this is Scorpio, this is the deep, shadowy underbelly of the past. All of the dark, all of the hidden, all of the repressed. And yes, this is access to the mysteries, the cult esoteric mysteries of existence, the transmutation and alchemy of the self, but also all of the shadowy, hidden parts of our collective consciousness, deeply rooted in the occult. So keep that in mind as we navigate this month. And I wanted to look up the dates of CERN. I have it written somewhere. I think CERN's experiment that just got launched at the around the equinox. I think it like takes a long time. Like it's like turned on, and then like there's all these different stages where it goes from like one segment of the collider to the next one. I think it ends around this time. It's over on Patreon. Maybe one of you guys can go look on Discord but maybe I forgot to post it. I know it's over on Instagram. I'll have to look. Anyway, what was I saying? Where are we going now? We talked about that. We talked about that. We talked about that. And we talked about that. Okay, so the Mars-Neptune conjunction will be exact the day after the blood moon, both of which are trining the moon at the time of the moon. And this really gives aid to the spell, to the collective illusion, to any sort of set of rose-colored glasses or fantasies that anybody anywhere has upon them. So this will really help aid any sort of fuckery that might be going on the world stage throughout this month. So trust nothing, you know what I mean? But this will also help us to pierce through our own illusions and or double down on them. It's a kind of a double-edged sword. We can either push forward to pierce through them. The asteroid that will be conjunct here is the Sphinx. So we're in the midst of a literal riddle, a puzzle. Like, things aren't as they seem. You know how like riddles, it's not the obvious answer that is usually the answer. It's a play on words. It's a twist. There's a trick behind it, but there's also truth in it, right? That's kind of where we're at. We have to learn how to navigate the dream while being lucid, understanding it is a dream and there's value here that can be obtained, but I cannot take it all too seriously because it's a fucking dream. And that's kind of where we're at. And the Sphinx is definitely going to make it so we could, and the Saturn square to that moon too, there is a test that we could pass, an initiatory test that will help unlock some sort of deep insight, but it's not going to be as it seems, and it will require us to think outside of the box and not take things too seriously. Okay. Oh, interesting. So the same day that Mars conjuncts Neptune and the Sphinx and the illusion and mystic truths are ignited simultaneously, the moon transits over Pandora and Ophiuchus. And so that box that is open to everything we need to process in order to obtain the hope that resides within the box, and the battle between our consciousness, our higher consciousness, our lower consciousness, and our more polarized consciousness, because I'm not saying Ophiuchus is higher. He's working to integrate the serpent and then become higher in doing so. That is how they can then reach higher to the crown constellation that sits above him and the serpent, and they can grasp it together and crown themselves as enlightened together. He can't reach it on his own. So the moon will be transiting over Pandora and Ophiuchus the same day that we're being initiated into a riddle, a spell, and also an opportunity for deep mystic truths. So we'll probably be forced to work through a lot of, I guess, probably projections, a lot of shadowy things within our mind, our consciousness, in order to unlock said mystic truths, if that makes sense. But the month revolves heavily around alchemy. Very, very, very heavily around alchemy. Okay. On the 19th, we will meet over on, on the 18th, the moon transits over the Galactic Center, Medusa, and Atlantis, both of which are retrograde, and the moon will transit over it, reflecting back to us internally, intuitively, emotionally, that which all of this is about. So if you have any sort of intuitive, more those hidden, not so much like the Uranus, like clear cognizant insights that will be happening earlier in the month. This is more intuitive. This is just felt on an internal level. You might have some sort of hints about what this might be around that time. Okay, so on the 19th, we'll have our B&B live stream where we will dive back into that Jungian reading of King Arthur and his knights. So this book we've been reading, it's available here on YouTube. We've already read, quite a bit. I don't know where we left off. Is it where we left that little thing? I don't know. I have so many tabs in here. But I know we left off where I think it was like Return to the Goddess or The Mysteries of the Grail. I can't remember. One of those chapters. And so we're going to dive back into this reading. We've already read quite a bit. And it's available here on Patreon. And we'll dive back in on the 19th and maybe finish it. Maybe not. It depends on how much we chat. I have no control over my mouth. So on the 19th, not only will we be meeting to dive into that fabulous book, but the cosmos are prime for diving deep in and like penetrating deep into ideally the unconscious, which is what that book is, talking all about, is the archetypal expressions of our consciousness and the path of individuation that we trek on while integrating all of these fractals of self, right? So on that day, the sun will trine Pluto retrograde. So the sun will be here in Taurus and it will trine Pluto retrograde, and the moon will transit over it as well. So Pluto, when direct, helps us to dive deep in and see. It helps us pierce through and get to the bottom of things. It's very connected to analytical psychology and the study of archetypes. Well, being as though it's retrograde, it's really helping us to reassess our views of these archetypes. And because this book is written by a modern woman, I think she does a really good job of looking at these things from a very deep, penetrating perspective, but from a modern lens where she is reassessing things that were looked at differently in the past, usually because of the patriarchal systems that Capricorn governs. So I think that transit, it's why I picked that day. I think that transit will really help us. Also, I'm fond of Pluto for my thinking processes because he is natally conjunct my Mercury. So when there are positive Pluto transits like the sun trine Pluto, it really speaks my language and helps me dive deep and grasp concepts. Mercury retrograde will also be sextiling Jupiter on that day. So that's super interesting because if you remember, both of these planets start their little quest at the same time. Jupiter entered Aries and Mercury stationed retrograde on the same day, on the 10th. We talked about how Jupiter is that rebirth of our higher self, and because of that rebirth of the higher self, this analytical, logical part of ourself, our thinking mind, needs to reassess some stuff here in Gemini. Well, on this day, Mercury will sextile Jupiter. That's like a trine, so it's beneficial energy, but it's like a trine that requires work. It requires us to take initiative. It requires us to take some sort of action in order to seek the benefit that these planets have and want to like transpire between each other. So that is a good day for getting into whatever all of this about, whatever all this Pluto retrograde is about, whatever all this Mercury retrograde is about, whatever Jupiter is coming to expand that was already kind of initiated back in spring. The 19th is a really good day to see and grasp and understand. So maybe circle that day. The sun will then enter Gemini on the 20th. And we're really going to feel this shift. Take some time from now until the 20th, while the sun is still in Taurus, in order to build some sort of structural foundation and sense of grounding and stability. Because once the sun enters Gemini, we are going to feel so scattered and kind of all over the place. And that's Gemini's jam. Gemini is kind of meant to go all over the place and collect little bits of information everywhere, all the different sides of the story. And so it is very kind of like manic and all over the place. Those of us who are on any sort of spectrum, whether that be any sort of neurodivergent spectrum, whenever any of the air signs are in play, maybe not so much Libra, even though for me, very much so because I have so many planets there, but Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, when those signs are highlighted, so are our attention issues and are bouncing all over the place. Now, I don't want to use the word issue, our attention divergences, because oftentimes where we're being drawn there for a reason, because it lends some sort of benefit for us and our personal development. Oftentimes not so much. Sometimes we're just getting distracted by scrolling through whatever or bouncing from thing to thing. So try to align with a semblance of grounding and foundational, like a foundation in which to build upon between now and the 20th, because once the sun moves into Gemini, it's going to be hard to do so. We're going to be all over the place. It's just kind of how we are. But a lot of information will come through. Mercury retrograde, moving over this area of the sky again, can also bring through a lot of information on a collective scale, you know what I mean? But anything that comes out during Mercury retrograde might be reassessed. So even the announcement on the 12th of whatever the center of our galaxy is, Mercury will be retrograde at that time. So it may even come out later that like, oh, just kidding, that's not true. Actually, this is what's true. So, take everything with a grain of salt while Mercury is retrograde, because wires are crossed and things may change in the future. But also it's just, especially in Gemini, it's helping to reaffirm some sort of information that already came through. So the fact that they will be divulging to us something they've probably already known for some time, it does kind of speak to a Mercury retrograde type of like announcement. But I still barely trust anything anybody says to me, so who knows? Okay, where are we at? Sun moves into Gemini. Look and see where Gemini falls in your chart. For me, it's my 10th house. So it has a lot to do with my purpose and my career and my public standing and all that jazz. For you, it's going to be somewhere else, but this is where we learn. This is where we question. This is where we are very focused on information collecting and communicating. Yeah. All right, so the sun, after transiting into Gemini, will very quickly conjunct Mercury retrograde. It will be the next day. The sun will conjunct Mercury retrograde on the 21st. It's actually a really big day. So the sun will conjunct Mercury retrograde and Hecate and the main star in The Pleiades. So a lot of people think that the Pleiades are in Taurus. They are not. They used to be in Taurus, but because the stars move 1 degree every 72 years, Alcyone, the main star in the Pleiades, is actually at 0 degrees, 17 minutes of Gemini. That's where it is. People get this wrong all the time, and it's really annoying. But that's the main star in the Pleiades. The sun will align with that. So we have the sun and Mercury retrograde conjunct each other, and Hecate and Alcyone all on the 21st, the same day that Jupiter opposes the super galactic center. That's a really big day. The sun aligning with Hecate is aligning with that goddess of witchcraft and magic who has dominion over all realms, the mother maiden crone, the divine feminine focused on our sovereignty and the lighting of torches in the bottom of the underworld in order for us to see and find our way back to ourselves. Very focused on magic. We had Hecate over here in Taurus for our last eclipse, conjunct the North Node. This was very focused on practical, tangible magic in the physical realm. Here, however, this is more mental. This is very much focused on the mind and our processes of communication, our processes of learning. All of these things will be coming up for us. Mercury and the sun are all together. They're going to be aligned with Hecate and the Pleiades, all while Mercury is pretty much just stationed direct. When the sun and Mercury align, it really does help align our minds together in order for us to see clearly, learn, comprehend, and understand. But this will be happening during retrograde. So it's not going to make sense right away. It'll make sense again later. We have to embrace the unseen parts of ourselves and trust in our mystic faculties in order to reconfigure our mind, which is what this Mercury retrograde is going to be doing because of this Jupiter Aries rebirth of the higher mind. We're reconfiguring the mind, and to do that we're integrating Hecate, we're integrating magic, we're integrating the feminine, which is what Jupiter just did as it transited through Pisces. It integrated the cosmic womb, it integrated its wizard. And it's interesting that this huge conjunction between Hecate, the sun, Mercury, and Alcyone, which we'll touch on here in a second, happens the same day that Jupiter opposes the supergalactic center, which is interesting because Jupiter entered into Aries the same day that Mercury stationed retrograde. We can see how they're connected. They also sextiled a couple of days before, and so they're working together. Jupiter, that rebirth of the higher self, the higher mind, opposing the supergalactic center on that day is really going to be expansive. That would be something to maybe even take advantage of ceremonially if you're called to do so. Alcyone is a very interesting point. Traditionally, in fixed star astrology, it doesn't have the best archetypal energy. It's usually just attributed to pain and misery and wallowing in tears and things like that. Alcyone, the Pleiades are the daughters of Atlas, which is the king of Atlantis. And so it is deeply rooted in Atlantean mythology. We talked in a last video about how many ancient calendars started here. They started aligned with the Pleiades, and so it is deeply rooted in our past. This point sits here on the cusp between Taurus and Gemini, between our mind and our body and our heart, because Taurus is ruled by Venus. And so it sits between our physical body and our mind, and a balance between our consciousness and our the matter that makes up this physical realm, and finding a union between the two. Archetypally speaking, through like UFO lore, like especially nowadays, I take a lot of the ET interpretations of races with a grain of salt, but I am a firm believer in thought forms. So I'm a firm believer that if enough people believe something, it exists in our collective consciousness. And there are enough people that believe that the Pleiadians are an advanced civilization that are helping to guide us. I'm not convinced that they are our friends, but I do think that they exist. What is interesting about them is that the stars in the Pleiades are actually much, much, much younger than our sun. So if there is an advanced civilization that lives there, they figured it out before we did. Or they lived around their star much sooner than humans lived on Earth. They are believed to be very focused on the like union of polarities and this like ambiguous middle ground, this more androgynous energy that is expressing both its masculine and feminine faculties together and to the same degree as each other, both in unison. And it's said that they navigate from a position of like an evolved heart space, like a higher heart that balances I used to say like the solar plexus and the third eye, like meeting at the heart. But now I look at it more as like the womb space, like the sacral, the feminine, and the third eye, which is very focused on the masculine consciousness meeting at the heart and navigating from that position. But these stars are starting to drift farther into Gemini. They are starting to drift farther into the mind and really moving away from the physical Taurian realm of the heart and the body. So this alignment with Alcyone is going to have us probably aligned with this concept of the past, this Atlantean timeline, the lessons that all these ancient cultures rooted in these old calendar systems have to offer, and also all of the karma. It's going to help us find this sort of balance between like polarities. So Gemini governs both sides, right? It's said that Gemini is where the 1 becomes 2, and then Sagittarius, which sits opposite Gemini, is where the 2 become 1, and they ultimately become 1 at the galactic center by Ophiuchus integrating the serpent, which all sits right here. But Gemini is where the 1 becomes 2, and so the point of a Gemini is to see the other side, is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Eddie is a Gemini. He is a Gemini stellium in the 12th house, though, so he's real weird. And his sun aligns actually with the pole star, and he's born on the summer solstice. And he is so Gemini. I love that man to death, but he can always tell you the other side of every freaking thing. He can always play devil's advocate. He can always be like, but what if? Even if it's not like what he believes. Gemini is always there to see the other side. And much of what this Mercury retrograde is going to be about is kind of seeing the other side and finding a balance between, and integrating much of our own sovereign magic in the process. But this is mental magic. And the process of like even like protecting our sovereignty of our mind, which is ultimately going to be very important as we navigate whatever this spell is all about. Sovereignty of the mind is how I'm kind of seeing this. Okay. And all of that is actually happening as the moon transits Cygnus and Saturn, both of which are attributed to deep initiations and the passing of karmic tests. We talked earlier how Saturn is. Cygnus is the star, which is Saturn is currently aligned with. It's a constellation, which is a bird, which we've talked about a bunch of times. But I'm going to kind of quickly tell you what it's about. So Cygnus is super interesting for a bunch of reasons. One, the largest black hole that we know of, even bigger than the supergalactic center. We don't rotate around it, but it's the biggest one that we know of, that we've ever discovered, sits inside Cygnus. It's actually believed that the Sumerians knew about it, and they depicted it on a couple of their stone star tablets. It's believed that Göbekli Tepe, the oldest known megalithic site, dated to 12,000 BC, was aligned with Cygnus. They also, on all of the pillars, had birds depicted, believed to have been attributed to Cygnus. Cygnus is the swan or the bird. In Egyptian mythology, it's often connected to Mahat, which is the bird that the soul meets after it dies and before it goes on to what's next. And it, much like the Sphinx, is presented with a riddle or a test or some sort of karmic initiatory process that it needs to pass. If it passes, it gets to move on. If it doesn't pass, it has to reincarnate. And so Cygnus is very strongly connected to these tests of the soul that help to push us forward. Saturn is the same. It's why Saturn gets a bad rap, because he tests us in order to help us grow through deep initiations and harsh confrontations with our self and our reality. So the moon will be transiting over that on that day. Okay, so on the 22nd, Mercury retrograde will enter Taurus. Oh, yeah, I was looking at the sun. Okay, yeah, on the 22nd, Mercury retrograde will enter Taurus. And so, like I had said earlier, we want to look and see where both these houses are, because not only will it be shifting, reconfiguring the sign governed by Gemini, reconfiguring our mind, but after doing so, it's going to dip back into Taurus, and it's like, okay, now that you've done that, you need to reconfigure your foundation because it was not built properly. Something there needs to be tweaked, revisited, restructured, in order to then move forward from a balanced perspective, in order to understand the message that's trying to come through. And then it will station, it will also, Mercury will also end up transiting, it will transit all the way back to Medusa, like we had said earlier. So we're going all the way back to that which was forgotten and repressed and shunned to a cave, in order to integrate it and find a firm footing, and then truck back forward from a position of truth after integrating whatever this message was about. Mercury, the messenger of the gods, he's trying to get us to understand something. He wants something to come through. He wants us to be able to grasp and learn and understand some fucking message. And that message, looking to see whatever houses these are, will help you to kind of grasp that. But it's revolving around whatever this eclipse is and leaning into the house that Gemini governs as well. Okay, so on the 24th, Mars will enter Aries, pretty much conjunct Jupiter. Its exact conjunction with Jupiter is on the 29th. The moon is here as well that day, and so we are really going to be feeling it. And internally, outwardly, Mars on a higher expansive plane, Jupiter. This is a huge, huge, huge rebirth of this self in whatever area this is. Like I said before, this is all happening opposite the supergalactic center. And so we have this supergalactic boost happening behind this. Mars and Jupiter together is transformative. That is expressive, pushing us forward. But this is how we can go overboard. This is the day to really watch out for. Once Mars enters into Scorpio, into Aries on the 24th, that is that energy of maybe being able to go overboard in these big grandiose ways. That's when it really does start to come online. Prior to that, while Jupiter is there really trying to push us forward. Jupiter and Aries can just be like that, but Mars in Aries, in its home sign of Aries, it is ready to go. And we need to know that we're trying to go and expand areas that have already been birthed and initiated, as opposed to new areas of our reality. Try to keep that in mind as you navigate this. It will be hard. All of these planets want to just do a whole bunch of new things. And then the sun in Gemini is going to want to do a whole bunch of new things. If I had a freaking quarter for every time Eddie said, I have $1 million idea, and it actually be $1 million idea, and me be like, dude, that's a freaking good idea, you should do that, and then he never does it because 5 seconds later he has a new $1 million idea. Like, we're gonna be in that mindset of like constantly new ideas, new things. Well, Mercury is going to be asking us to redo things that we've already done, and so it's going to be hard to navigate, but just keep that in mind. While Mercury's retrograde, I'm not saying not to do new things. I am not that type of astrologer. I think that would hold you back. Some things are meant to be done, particularly around eclipse season. Sometimes we have no choice, but to work with this energy to its highest octave, it's asking us to use this expansive energy to expand something we've already started. So thinking about some things that you've seeded but haven't had the motivation. This is very motivational energy. Haven't had the motivation to do. This might help you to do it. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so Mercury will trine Pluto retrograde on the 25th. So we already had Mars trining Pluto retrograde earlier in the month. Well, now Mercury retrograde and Pluto retrograde will be trining each other. And so they'll be kind of exchanging whatever it is their retrogrades have been about, like kind of exchanging wisdom. It's like Pluto will be like, look, dude, I've been digging deep into this area, reconfiguring this area that I've been deeply transforming over a very long period of time. Pluto has been in Capricorn for so long, and I am uncovering some things that we missed, and I'm being able to go a little bit deeper, and here's what I've learned, and here's what we need to work through. And then Mercury is like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm over here, and I'm trying to build a new structure with all of the new information being thrown at me. Mercury, Gemini, the sun in Gemini is really going to have a whole bunch of information coming through to us. But remember, the wires are going to be crossed. After Mercury stations direct, and even after his shadow period, we'll see what a lot of this was about. Okay, 25th. Mercury retrograde will trine Pluto retrograde, and Venus will conjunct the Andromeda galaxy. So Venus, the planet of love, will align with the Andromeda galaxy, our Milky Way galaxy's divine partner, divine counterpart, twin flame, whatever it is you want to call it, in Aries, the sign of passion, with Mars there as well in its home sign on the 25th. This I'm really calling a huge galactic heart expansion for the self and the partnership. And the same day that this is happening, the moon transits over Chiron and Andromeda as well. And so we're really feeling that and able to internalize that and able to transmute that and integrate that. All things the moon helps us with. Okay. So, and also this day, if things are really confusing because Mercury is retrograde and our logical mind is not making sense of our reality, this moon transit over Chiron will help us to really see what a lot of all of this like serpent, wound, psyche type things we've been talking about all month that are really highlighted, all of the hidden, all of the things that are seeking integration. Our personal wounds, and then also the moon transiting over Venus in the galactic center are going to help us to navigate from an unseen space of heart-centered intuition, but it can be skewed by this sort of rose-colored glasses in regards to other people. If we can get in our heart space and not be like distracted by the illusions set forth by others, we can navigate from a deep intuitive heart-centered space around this time to where things might make sense internally. We might not be able to vocalize them because Mercury is retrograde, but internally we'll intuitively know, if that makes sense. I think that's my catchphrase, if that makes sense. Okay. On the 26th, we will meet for our Gemini new moon live stream. And Venus will actually be trining Pluto retrograde on that day. Conjunct the moon and trining Pluto retrograde. These are deep internal transformations of not just the self, but our relationships as well. Because it will be aligned with the Andromeda galaxy. So these are our deeply fated galactic transformative partnerships. 26. So, we'll be meeting on that day to dive into the Gemini moon, which is exact on the 30th. But I don't like to do things on the weekends. Okay, so on the 27th, Mars will oppose the supergalactic center. All of these planets oppose the supergalactic center this month. Venus, Jupiter, and Mars, and the moon. Obviously, it does so every month. Will all oppose the SGC this month and align with that super source of consciousness. A black hole is an evolved sun. It is a sun that has lived out its life, gone supernova, turned into a black hole, pierced the fabric of space-time, and moved on to something else. It is advanced cosmic consciousness, more advanced than a sun, more advanced than a star. Especially the supergalactic center, because it's believed to have been one of the first stars to originate after the Big Bang. So it is deeply rooted in ancient cosmic knowledge and also whatever's next, whatever's on the other side of the space-time continuum, right? And all of these planets will be aligning with it this month. Okay, so on the 28th, Venus will enter Taurus. This is really nice. This will start to bring more grounding back to the scattered energy we might be feeling as the sun is in Gemini and we're kind of all over the place, but kind of for a purpose, to kind of collect information from everywhere. But we won't really have a sense of grounded footing. We'll have to really work for that. But once Venus enters Taurus, its home sign, we'll really be feeling that. We'll want to be more focused on like self-care and the sensual aspects of our reality. Like take a bath, read a book, take a nap, relax, eat some good food. This is a really good transit for money. It'll be conjunct Uranus though later. So money changes, whether it can go up or down. Venus rules money, Uranus rules changes. It can go either way. Venus in Taurus definitely rules money when it's in Taurus. The foundational money and resources that we need in order to build that firm foundation we need in order to grow around the rest of the zodiac. This is where we get our resources. Venus has a lot to do with the more finer aspects of our existence. This is art and music and creativity, but like physical things. But we'll start to feel more grounded. We'll definitely start to feel more grounded once Venus moves into Taurus on the 28th. That same day, the moon will transit over Andromeda and Sophia. So the moon will be transiting over stars in Andromeda and the asteroid Sophia right here. Oh, earlier in the day, the asteroid Sophia right here. And so again, that is, we talked about Medusa being like the shunned and repressed feminine because of like her wound, ultimately because of being like raped. She was shunned and sent away to a cave, like brushed under the rug, like let's not talk about this. Sophia is the forgotten feminine. She is that primordial mother that predated the birth of light itself. She is the pre-conscious, unconscious realm that was ultimately forgotten and we need to remember even exists. And so that's the energy that will be bubbling up from our emotional lunar waters around that time, because the sun will be transiting over it, as well as Andromeda. She is ultimately chained and working to free herself, and ultimately we break free from our chains and come back into oneness within the self when we remember this forgotten feminine part of our psyche. Okay, so that's the 28th. Okay, so on the 29th, Mars and Jupiter will conjunct in Aries, opposite the supergalactic center. This is the day we can tend to go overboard, but also have like tons of motivation to like do whatever it is that this sparked. Think back to like the spring equinox. What have you started to birth since surfacing from the waters of Pisces, since we like came up from air from the cosmic ocean, and we started to seed things in the spring? What was it? If you guys know, you can type in the chat. But Jupiter is coming to expand that area, and Mars is coming to give us the motivation to actually freaking do it. And that'll be exact on the 29th, the day before the Gemini new moon, which falls on the 30th. Mercury will be conjunct Algol on that day, so Mercury retrograde. Well, he'll station direct in like 3 days on the 3rd of next month. But on that day, the same day as the moon, it will be conjunct the head of Medusa. And so really that's what this was all about, Medusa going direct. This diving into these deep, deep, deep feminine wounds, which we can see bubbling up on a collective scale right now, just with this whole Roe versus Wade, women's rights, what's a woman, we don't know, we're gonna erase her type of a freaking thing happening on the collective scale right now. The feminine parts of our psyche are simultaneously being erased and integrated by many of us here, and many of us more mystically inclined folks simultaneously. And it's a weird sort of Twilight Zone scenario humanity is in right now. But the more work we can do personally, the farther we can push the collective consciousness forward. So Mercury retrograde will be conjunct the severed head of Medusa, the alchemized severed head of Medusa, something we'll be diving into in our next Patreon video. And the Gemini new moon will be, it's earlier in the day, but it falls at 9 degrees, 3 minutes of Gemini, conjunct Aldebaran and Hecate. So those are going to be some of the archetypes we'll be diving into later this month. Aldebaran is a very interesting star connected very strongly to the Nazis and Nordic ETs and ancient civilizations, and this concept of the watcher stars that used to house the equinox and solstice points in the past, but they have since moved out of dominion, and what has moved into their place are the black holes. So these stars are like our ancient archonic rulers, and so they hold a lot of connection to all of the karma of the past, particularly rooted in patriarchal dynasties, because these stars, these royal fixed stars, which Aldebaran is one of, are very strongly connected to royalty, kings, and empires. And so we'll be diving deep into that star for that moon. But for now, that's probably all I'll say. But it's interesting that we have Aldebaran, which is like deeply rooted in like polarized, masculine, light dominating consciousness. It's associated with like Archangel Michael, which is always trying to like, kill the dragon. And I think it's interesting that it will also be aligned with Hecate, the three-faced goddess, the mother maiden crone. And so this Gemini new moon is working to integrate both sides of the spectrum, the polarized Archangel Michael, light is right consciousness, and the three-faced goddess together as one. But that'll be something we dive into more on that video. Okay, I have cards. Oh wait, I just want to look at all the stuff I wrote here to make sure I said all this stuff. Unseen electric insights. Yeah. Okay, we're good. I have cards, and then we'll call it a night. Okay. Guys, take a screenshot of this and come back and read it. It has some pretty interesting stuff. Okay, so these are the cards that I pulled. I always like to end with an archetype card because I throw so many at you guys. And I'm like, okay, sum it up. The month of May. What archetype best summarizes this month's energy? And the card that came out was the Unseen, which honestly makes so much sense. So I'll go ahead and read this from the book. This is the archetype that's most prevalent for us right now. The spirit, the ancestor, the eternal. The unseen. The unseen is just as it sounds. We cannot see it, yet it sees us, watching and waiting with wisdom, both kind and instructive. We feel this presence, sense it, intuit, and then doubt its existence. Oh my God, yeah. Okay. We sense it, intuit, and then doubt its existence, though it rallies our attention time and time again. The energy of the unseen may come in many forms: a compelling dream, a sudden insight, a clear voice, a vision or message from a loved one who has passed to the other side. It is natural to feel these communications as they challenge our perception of what is real. When this card appears, your guides are near. The eternal is present. The doorway between worlds is ajar. Listen. The sounds may seem as though they come from a distant land, but they call from our innermost chambers. Being graced by the unseen is a gift. Treat it kindly. Allow yourself to be seen by eternal eyes. Guidance comes in many forms. Don't expect it to be glittery or comfortable. The spirit world speaks the truth. Sometimes it soothes and sometimes it burns. When this archetype is evolved, it is clairvoyant guidance and whispers of wisdom. But when it's in its lower archetype, it is dark, gloomy energy and unwilling to forgive. It says to go deeper, you can read Hamlet or About the Three Fates. Azul 11 says that they have a Pleiadian guide and they're a psychic medium and that they believe they exist. Yeah, I don't not believe they exist. I'm just like, I'm really big on everything being inside of me. So whether they exist or not, or whether any ET race exists on any star or not, it doesn't really matter to me because the star exists and that star has a consciousness to it, and all of the stars reside within me. We have every sign within us. Every sign governs an area of your life. Even if you have no planets there, every single sign governs some house in your chart, and it governs some area of your life. And within that house is every star within that sign. And so we have all of it, and we're seeking integration with all of it. And the problem I have with the New Age movement and the Starseed movement and the archetypes that are placed on a lot of the star systems nowadays is this concept of these outside entities, and some of them being good and some of them being bad. And honestly, what it does is it keeps many people from integrating the Draco constellation, because it's often associated with reptilians, when really the Draco constellation is the dragon in all mythologies that holds all of our wisdom, our knowledge, and the integration of our power and sovereignty. And ultimately it circles the pole star, the unlocking of the pole star and that polar pillar that I was talking about. I have a whole video on Patreon about this Axis Mundi, this polar pillar. So I tend to try to remove myself from a lot of the more specific interpretations of any of the ET races, including the Pleiadians. Also, I think they're working with our government, and I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure I trust them, but that's really cool that you have a guide. And we all have these parts of our consciousness. We all have a Pleiadian part of our consciousness, which is ultimately a guide for all of us. We all are seeking integration between all of the stars, which is actually what this card is going to get to, within us, every single one of us, including the Pleiades. Yeah. But I do think that something exists there. But I also think that a lot of what is attributed to the Pleiades in mythology is actually depictions of the 7 stars of Ursa Major, which, like Draco, revolves around the pole star and are the 7 stars guiding us to the pole star, the Big Dipper. And a lot of the attributes of the Pleiades that are in ancient mythology attributed to it are often misinterpretations for Aldebaran, which kind of sits right by the Pleiades as well. So I think they're given a little bit too much credit, and just in the modern New Age movement, not so much in like more ancient occult traditions, esoteric traditions, or like ancient mythology. But a lot of ancient civilizations did tie their calendar to that star cluster, including the Mayans. Okay, so we pulled the card of the unseen, which is ultimately the energy we're kind of floating through all month. And so then I thought I would pull a card. You guys, this is so hilarious. I'm going to read this from the book. This had me laughing so loud, these old interpretations. So this card in the middle is from this deck. This deck was made in the 1920s in Paris, but it was originally developed by an occultist in the 1800s. And where was I reading this? Oh, on here. In the 1800s, and the pictures were attributed to that time too, and then it was like released in the 20s. So it has really, really, really old interpretations. But what I asked when I was shuffling was, okay, what can we see? If we're trekking through this realm of the unseen, what is it that we can see? And what I pulled was Mars, which is interesting because Mars is right now in Pisces, and it's going to conjunct Neptune. And so what we'll be seeing then is the illusion. But then it's going to be moving into Aries and piercing through the veil and giving a rebirth of the self with Jupiter. And so it really shows that the focus of what we can see is going to be governed around the Pisces, Aries part of our chart, right? Okay, I have to read this to you guys. It's so hilarious. Okay. Mars. Helmeted, pike in hand and shield by his side, with his firm chin covered with a red beard, the chief's wand concealed scarcely rested from his hard fighting Mars, the god of war. I read that right, but it sounds extra weird. Okay. Scarcely rested from his hard fighting, Mars, the god of war and of the passions, is about to give himself up to the indulgence of love and voluptuousness. His activity and vitality will often lead him to guilty associations with Venus and the weak women who love possesses. As a Libra, I take offense to that statement, but like, okay, whatever. And then he goes on to say, this card represents the man, the lover. It denotes anger, frankness, passion, strength. It brings success through industry and activity, and also through personal merit. When afflicted, this card causes blood disorders, hemorrhage, bronchial disease, dementia, and gallstones, which could require surgical treatment. Like, what? This does, oh my gosh. Old astrology books are hilarious. They're hilarious, you guys. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. But really what this tells me, what we can see is the area over there governed by Pisces and Aries. So the realm of illusion and the rebirth of the self. And being careful not to take it to excess because Mars is there and he likes to go, 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 go. Okay, so the last card I pulled was, I've been pulling this card so much for so many of my clients. And for a lot of these moon videos, I've pulled this card so much the past couple of months. But I always pull from this Wild Harmonic Oracle. And I'm like, because this gives a lot of like, it has a little meditation, a little inquiry. It gives like practical, tangible advice. And so I always use this deck for, okay, how do we do that? How do we navigate the realm of the unseen while seeing what Mars is seeing without going overboard? How do we navigate this month? And this is the card that came out, the Water of Celestial and the Dreaming in Layers. And I love the symbolism in this card because we see the sun and moon conjunct, which speaks a lot to eclipse season, both the Taurus solar eclipse and the Scorpio blood moon, right? We also see this like fixed star realm, which speaks to this like vast space. These circles all behind here speak a lot to like black holes to me, and all of the black holes are activated this month. We're also expanding out to this vast celestial realm. But honestly, us as human, is here just like chilling in the middle, right? Look at her. She's like, I'm just chilling and going with the flow. Sitting as this middle pillar between these polarities, between the as above and the so below, and acting as that mediary between two things, being the middle between the light and the dark, the above and the below, any sort of polarized forces. Ultimately, I think that that is the lesson that this discovery of whatever they are going to tell us about the center of our galaxy is going to help us as a individual and as a collective integrate, is being the middle and the extremes simultaneously and understanding the purpose of them all while ideally going with the flow. Usually when I can like explain my point with that, people tend to agree with me. That whole thing on the starseed stuff. It's just because, like, if you think about it, okay, I can Google right now Pleiadian starseed whatever, or like the Pleiadians, and I have tons of books written by people on the Pleiadians. I have read tons of stuff, and everybody has a different interpretation of it. And it's because everybody's like you. They're all experiencing it through their lens, and whatever guiding force they have within them, their own Pleiadian lens, where the Pleiades falls in their chart, what planets might be aligned with it, what house it might be in, it's always going to be in the same sign, in Taurus, Gemini right there, but how we're expressing it is how we can see this energy. And the same thing with any star civilization that supposedly exists. Every blog is going to tell us something different about it. And so there's not a definitive energy that any of these hold. And as you'll see in astrology, that's the same with the signs. We've been diving deep into all of the archetypes of the constellations and even the planets, and how, here in the West, Saturn is looked as like the daddy, Kronos, right? But in Vedic tradition, it's actually neutral and expresses both masculine and feminine aspects. I did a whole video about how it's very connected to the crone archetype. And I'm really big on just like integrating all aspects of all the consciousnesses. And I think that the New Age movement does a disservice because a lot of starseedy people, we kind of woke up, and many of us got sucked into a New Age religion doctrine where things they just believe as fact. And I believe everything's up for interpretation. And so that's why I try to work with all of these things as impulses of the collective psyche that is represented to us here in the sky, but also here in our mind, and then it's reflected back to us here on Earth. And somehow we're supposed to integrate them all together. How? I don't know. We're all still trying to figure this out. But I think when we get caught up on any sort of like dogma, then we get stuck in a system. That's kind of like my viewpoint. But usually when I can like say that all out loud, people tend to agree with me. Although not everybody will agree with my views on reptilians, people still are trying to like be like, that's so bad, and like run in the opposite direction, but you're just perpetuating the battle. If there are negative ETs that are reptilian humanoid entities, which I'm not convinced they exist, I actually think our government is working with Nordics, but that's a rabbit hole for another day. Actually, that's a rabbit hole for the Gemini new moon. We'll dive into my theories on that for the Gemini new moon. But let's say, for the sake of argument, reptilians exist and our government is working with them, and that they are from Alpha Draconis. If that is true, that is an aspect of me, because I am a firm believer that I am one with all that is. So with that theory in mind, that concept of reality in mind, every fucked up thing that's ever existed, including anything said reptilians may or may not have done, an aspect of me did that. And so me shunning that, turning away from it, is the same thing that happened to Medusa, is the same thing that caused all of these wounds. And so what we have to do is integrate that and every other aspect of existence. But yeah, like I said, that'll be a rabbit hole for the Gemini moon. But yeah, I lose a lot of people when I start talking about the reptilians because people are scared. But okay. Dreaming in layers. This is how we are going to navigate this month. Water of celestial. As the flowing feeling of life ascends into the celestial realms, it reveals the many layers of interpretation and endless celestial realms within, which is pretty much what I was just saying. There's so many different versions of interpretation, and especially once the sun enters Gemini, we'll really be looking at all of the different aspects of what could be, always the other side. Yeah, people do get scared. And then the endless celestial realms within, this all is within you. I think that's also another disservice that people do to themselves. I see people being like, I am a Pleiadian starseed. I am a Sirian starseed. It's like, okay, that's it? What, you're only from one star? You're not connected to source or all of it? I think when we label ourselves with any one source of consciousness, we limit our consciousness. And what we're really, the goal is to understand that we have these endless realms of celestial consciousness within. All of the stars are within you. Every single one of the stars. You may not have a planet aligned with the Pleiades. If you do have a planet aligned with the Pleiades, you're really expressing that Pleiadian energy very strongly. You may not have it, but the Pleiades falls in your chart somewhere. Every single one of the stars does, because they're all you, all of it. And so I think that we got to be careful with labels too. People tend to grab a hold of one, and then all that does is reject all of the others. So I think that's what my astrology practice revolves around, is kind of like uniting everything together. That's kind of my goal here. I hope I do that. I mean, I think it's a forever task that will never be completed, but it's my quest. Okay, a little meditation. Altered states of awareness, guidance, and understanding. This card is a recognition that we exist on many layers of experience, and that by tuning into them, seeking to find a means of helping the layers relate, we come to find a deeper wholeness and healing. Which is funny, because the only reason I even do the type of astrology that I do is because I, in the beginning, was convinced that I was a Sirian starseed. Because the Sirians were so fucking loud for so, like, Sirian synchronicities were everywhere in the beginning. I was like, what is happening? Am I an alien from the star system? Serious? Like, what the fuck is happening? And so I started diving into like fixed star astrology, and to see, I don't know how I got into it, but I started diving into fixed star astrology to find the Sirian alignments that I must have had. I don't have any. I don't have any Sirian alignments, but you know who does? My uncle, who died 1 month and 1 day before, 1 year and 1 month before I was born. And I think I'm either him reincarnated, because we have a lot of the same karma. Like, he died of a heroin overdose, and I had to not die of a heroin overdose by finally pulling my head out of my ass. And several other things. So I think I'm either him reincarnated, or he is one of my main guides, because he has a serious stellium, and he was also very loud around that time. So I later found that out. But in finding out that I did not have any Sirian alignments, it forced me to dive into all of the other things that I do have, which is like all of these black holes and all of this other stuff, and develop this entire system of astrology that we are now sitting here talking about. And that was all because I didn't get pulled into, if I had found those, I probably would have been like, okay, cool, that's what I was looking for. I am an alien from Sirius. And I probably would have rolled with it. So, like, thank you for not having that in my chart, universe. All right, I'm going to read this again from the beginning. Altered states of awareness, guidance, and understanding. This card is a recognition that we exist on many layers of experience, and that by turning into them, seeking to find a means of helping the layers relate, we come to find a deeper wholeness and healing. Closing my eyes opens my vision to far-reaching, imaginable realms, endless possibility. Learning to explore and relate to these many other states of being informs my life in ways that may at first seem easy to dismiss, yet contain keys to unlocking my potential. Inquiry. What are my dreams, visions, fantasies helping me to see about my life right now? And I think that's good. That's good advice for Jupiter, and actually really all of those planets transiting out of Pisces and into Aries, because this is where we've been. And we want to remember all of this right here. The realm of dreams and fantasies and visions is where we've been. And it's where we merge back with that Akashic realm of the whole, right? And then we're being rebirthed again in Aries with all of these planets. And it's easy to kind of forget where you came from, all of the visions, all of the stuff that Jupiter just learned in there, and to push forward with some grandiose, egoic vision in Aries. And so this is really asking us to remember what our dreams, what our visions, what all of Jupiter's trek through Pisces was all about. Really going and leaning into that mutable, watery, celestial realm, while also attempting to stay grounded in the physical. When Venus comes into Taurus, try to take advantage of that. Try to take advantage of this time leaning up before the sun moves into Gemini too, because that's when things are going to start to get pretty scattered. Okay, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for being here with me. Again, if you guys want to join my Patreon, it's linked below. We will be diving really deep into these moons over the month, over the next month, these next 2 moons, and touching on all those little archetypes I mentioned along the way. And then probably a lot more, because once I actually pull the chart of the moon and start to dive in and try to map out the whole picture and find where all the triggers are coming from, all the assistants are coming from, and find some sort of like archetypal dance, we see a lot more expand. And so I know there'll be a lot more once I dive in and I find like all the hidden asteroids and all the stuff like that. So we'll be a bunch of places. But yeah, super excited for whatever they're going to tell us about the center of the galaxy. Hope it's real. It's not bullshit. Who knows? You can never trust scientists. Who knows if this is even a real picture of a black hole? They could have just totally made this up and it not even be true. But it's a small group of like scientists. We'll see. We'll see. All I know is that when this was discovered, like I said before that, black holes were theoretical. Most astronomers thought that that's what sits at the center of galaxies that causes this huge gravitational pull, right? But they couldn't prove it. When this one was found, now they knew it was true, right? And around that, this sits on top of my sun, this black hole, the supergalactic center. That was literally when I was coming online. The galactic center sits on top of my moon, my Uranus, and it sits opposite my Chiron. And it sits right on top of Eddie's sun. No, opposite Eddie's sun. It sits opposite Eddie's sun. So that should be fun. I think that those of us who, if you have planets near 27 degrees of Sagittarius or 27 degrees of Gemini, those planets are either conjunct or opposite the galactic center. So My lips are like really chapped. So write in the chat if you guys have any sort of planets aligned with those points. If you do, those planets are going to be of focus as new information comes out about this point. Like, you will be able to embody those aspects more because this point is going to be embodied more by our collective consciousness. We will have a greater grasp of what it is. Ideally, we don't know what they're going to say. And those points will reflect that back to you. For example, like I said, this one aligned with my sun. That's my identity, my sense of self, my ego. Oh my God, I had a literal ego death as this was all transpiring. And this next one will be my moon. It falls in my 4th house of the mother of the womb, conjunct Uranus, and opposite my Chiron in the 10th house. And I am moved into some sort of chironic wounded healer type role where I get to share it's like backwards, so I can't, okay, there, where I get to like share my wounds on the internet for all to see. So much fun. But that's what happens when you have Chiron in the 10th house. Chiron is the house where we are seen by the public. The 10th house is the house where we are seen by the public, and I have Chiron there. So that will be activated by the Galactic center transits and whatever information comes through, as will my moon and Uranus, as will whatever planets you guys have there. So if you have, like I said, any planets around 27 degrees of Sagittarius or Gemini, it's aligned with the Galactic center. And if you have any planets around 2 degrees of Aries or Libra, it's aligned with the supergalactic center. And 27 degrees of Aries is the Andromeda galactic center. Those are the 3 main black holes that I use. All right, guys, have a great night. I will see you later. We will meet again on the 13th to dive into the blood moon, and it should be fun. Yeah, we'll be illuminating the mysteries. We're going to be diving into the occult mysteries, serpent symbolism. Over the next 2 eclipses, we're going to be diving into this concept, which I have already dove into here. Actually, you guys have access to it. It was one of the first videos I did. It actually was for the Draco moon a year or 2 years ago. I don't know. It's on here on YouTube, down all the way at the bottom. I think it's like the first video. But I dove into this symbolic, esoteric concept of the serpent and the cross, which is a symbol that's believed to date back to Atlantis. Both of those symbols were very strongly tied to like Atlantean lore. But we're going to be diving into that over the next 2 moons, as well as like Medusa, that mythology, and all kinds of stuff. It should be fun. So if you want to join us, link is below. And I'll see you guys there. Bye.